I would next like to introduce our director, Dr. James Rimmer. Of course, like he does not need any introduction. Probably everybody here knows him, but just in case. So Dr. Rimmer is the first Lakeshore Foundation Endo Chair in the Health Promotion and Rehabilitation Sciences at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He is a professor in the School of Health Professions at UAB and has an adjunct faculty appointment in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation in the School of Medicine. Dr. Rimmer is the director of two US federally funded centers, the National Center on Health, Physical Activity and Disability, NCPAD, and the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center, RERCTech. His research interest explores the use of new and emergent technologies in developing biobehavioral and environmental strategies to promote beneficial physical activity and healthful weight management in adults with physical disabilities. He's also the developer of an evidence-based set of guidelines, recommendations, and adaptations, including disability grades, which are being used in several communities across the US to promote community health inclusion. Dr. Rimmer's recent work involves the creation of a telehealth healthcare to wellness program for individuals with disabilities that includes mindfulness, exercise, and nutrition. Let me welcome Dr. Rimmer to give his talk.
Thank you very much, Zangi. And you're a very hard act to follow, Dr. Fulber-Pratt. I'm surprised that we've never crossed paths. You may have heard that I came from the University of Illinois, Chicago, where we had the first PhD program in disability studies with very good colleagues of mine, like Carol Gill, who I'm sure you know. So very excited about what you've described. And I would just want to mention, I want to go off script for a moment and mention that, you know, one of our visions here at UAB with Dr. Butler really supporting this is this area, what we're referring to in higher ed now as inclusion science. And what we mean by inclusion science is we want to see more faculty, more students on the UAB campus with disabilities, but we also want to make sure that every other center on campus includes people with disabilities in their research. And as we know historically, disability is often considered an exclusion criteria in higher education and in academic research. So all of the evidence-based work that has gone on across the world, for the most part, has excluded the more than 1 billion people with disabilities. So thank you so much for your opening comments. Really exciting to know that you know Jeff Underwood and the group at Lakeshore Foundation. You know Lakeshore. I was excited to hear that you want to come here and visit. We would love to have you. We had the former director here, John Cheetah, and you know, John constantly would say, what is the secret sauce about UAB and Lakeshore that really makes this engine run? So we'd love to share that with you. Now, I'm going to try to go very fast because I don't want to put us too far behind, but I did want to just lay out 3 things for the presenters as well as anyone who is participating, you know, virtually. I'm an older man. I have a Medicare card. That tells you how old I am. So I have to be at least 65, which is great, right? Half Puerto Rican, half Irish. My mother and father met in the Garment Center in Manhattan and love at first sight. So have a strong multicultural history. And you can imagine what it was like with an Irish father and a Puerto Rican mother living in the same household. So thank you for you know, all you do on the call, because I really do believe that we're here together as a family. Now, where do we come from? Well, I'm not going to go over this because Dr. Fulber-Pratt mentioned that we've got a lot of barriers to physical activity that we've got to deal with. And we can break this out across the socio-ecological spectrum. And as you can see, if you look at the socio-ecological model, there are really 4 categories: interpersonal and interpersonal, the first 2. And as Dr. Fulber-Pratt mentioned, you know, there are a lot of issues in every area or every domain of the socio-ecological model. As you can see here, fatigue is a major problem. Pain, more than 60% of the population that we've surveyed over the years has some level of pain. Sometimes they comment it takes too much effort. They're trying to conserve energy rather than expend energy, lack of ability, discomfort. Interestingly enough, some people exercise and they have pain. So we've got to begin to think about, in this new age of digital transformation, that we can't look at exercise statically. You know, it's not something, unfortunately, which is what we see in most of the research studies funded today. It's a 12-week program. There's a little bit of a follow-up period, and that's the end of it. And I don't think we can really look at our research in RECTech as following that same practice anymore. You may know that today, when you look at the major companies out there, most of them are going digital. So if you take just Netflix, for example, they started as a mail order service. You know, they basically went after Blockbuster, and of course we know where Blockbuster is today. And after they conducted that mail order service, if you remember, those of you young enough to remember when you would get 5 or 6 videos from Netflix, you'd have them for a certain period of time and then you'd send them back. Well, that's all gone now because everything is digital. So we've got to be thinking about these barriers that you see here, right? In intrapersonal, interpersonal, community, organizational. We've got to be able to develop algorithms that address all of these. And we've got to continually think about the fact that we can't look at this from a static perspective, you know, which is what we currently do today. We say, okay, we've got a new study, the inclusion criteria of people with spinal cord injuries. We very rarely ask about these multitude of barriers that they may experience. We put them through a 12-week study. We get a very significant percentage of people who may not finish the program. And then we publish the results. And I don't think that's the way we need to move going forward. Not with this area of being able to do everything online, capture data, and of course, be able to use that data again, you know, to produce better interventions. So why are we here today? Unfortunately, we haven't seen the dynamics of health disparities among people with disabilities change over the last 2 decades. Many people with disabilities experience multiple secondary conditions. You heard a few of them: pain, fatigue, depression, weight gain. You know, these are issues that we've got to begin to address, again, in a disability studies filter. You know, we're not talking about a top-down medical model. We want people with disabilities to be empowered, to be able to self-manage their own health. That's part of the new age of digital transformation. So together, we need to work in order to improve, you know, some of these health disparities that have been in the literature for the last 2 or 3 decades. A paper I published in 2012 shows that it's not only exercise that we need to consider, but there's a lot of good research today showing that if you reduce sedentary behavior, very simply, right, just getting up and moving more or pushing your wheelchair a few times a day. I was talking to a program officer at CDC who could no longer run. She used to be a national runner, and now she just kind of runs in her home on her carpet for about an hour. So as we get older, or as certain conditions change in our life, we have to change the type of physical activity we recommend. And that's what I mean by this dynamic state of digital transformation, where we capture data when someone stops exercising or slows down the amount of exercise they do. You know, these are the kind of suggestions where we need to look at sedentary behavior and maybe not focus so much on, you know, the typical exercise 5 days a week for 150 minutes. We may not be there yet. So just kind of in conclusion, think about today when you hear the presentation that we're really in this new generation. The world is going digital. You know, I remember when I started NICPID in 1999, everything were fact sheets, hard copies, you know, let's just make lots of things. And of course, that's not the case today. We're all paperless. Many people don't even have a printer. So we've got to be able to think about this today across the set of presenters that you'll hear about, that the next stage of RECTech really needs to look at how do we get the things people quickly, effectively, take that information and repurpose it so people can have a more qualitative experience. And this is David Wu, by the way. He's a colleague I met through Dean Butler, and he has a company called Modus Nova. And David's kind of figured this out as well with robot-assisted therapy, where now he's got everything online. They can speak to a coach. You know, he's got crowdsourcing, he's got social media networks, and he's going gangbusters, you know, through the age of digital transformation, reaching tens of thousands of people with stroke and other disabilities across the country. So he's got it in his mind, and certainly we want to be part of that as well. And then finally, you know, we've had this model for a number of years now. So we kind of know that with the pandemic, everything's been accelerated from the digital side. And you're going to hear a lot about that today from us presenters, that we really need to think continuously about how can we transition people from that rehabilitation setting after a recently acquired injury all the way into the community. And by the way, I want to mention today that even though you're going to be hearing about presentations related to doing home exercise, you know, that's not where we want people in. We consider this to be a push-pull center. We want people to not only start exercising in their home, but we want them to get out in their community, just like Dr. Forber-Pratt did, and go to tracks at high schools and participate in interscholastic sports and recreational activities in their community. So it's not either or, it's really both that we're targeted in RECTech. And of course, where we're going today, you'll hear about in theme one, this whole area of precision-based teleexercise, which is sort of a follow-up to precision-based medicine. It talks a lot about algorithms and artificial intelligence and big data. That's the future of RECTech, is grabbing this information, putting it into these algorithms, and then pushing it back out. That's what Netflix does. You know, they basically look at what is this individual watching today, and what can I recommend to them going forward when I start to see that they're no longer using a certain set of videos. So they constantly have our data, and everything today is about data. So that's it. You know, I want to end by saying, you know, my colleague and good friend, John Cheetah, said, we're not here to admire the problem. I would like those of you who are participating today to challenge our presenters on where they need to go with the next stage of their research. Thank you.